Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Massive flames and clouds of smoke filled the sky in Texas after a horrifying train crash. Oil tankers exploded, causing an inferno after a tractor trailer rammed into the train. Officials ordered residents to evacuate and sent in hazmat teams, but what happened to the conductor and the truck driver? Former Capitol Police officials agree the January 6th Capitol breach was pre-planned, but they disagree on why the National Guard deployment was delayed. The Biden administration is reopening a Trump-era migrant facility for children. The move is drawing criticism from both conservatives and progressives, but for different reasons. Families are getting vaccinated, but when can they start getting together with less restrictions? Dr. Fauci's facing criticism for waiting on the CDC to answer. And pro golfer Tiger Woods sustained multiple injuries in a car crash in California. First responders say he's in serious condition. Golf legend Tiger Woods is in the hospital after he was involved in a car accident in Southern California earlier today. LA County Fire Department reports he's in serious condition. Firefighters and paramedics had to use an axe and a Halligan tool to pry Woods from the wreckage. The 45-year-old was the only one involved in the rollover collision. His agent told Golf Digest that Woods is in surgery with multiple leg injuries. He was driving a Hyundai SUV. Officials with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department say the car crossed over to the wrong side of the road before crashing. Officials say Woods was conscious and able to communicate. There were no skid marks. And while there are indications the speed was higher, the area has a curved downhill slope and accidents often occur in this region. And the LA County Sheriff Chief says there was no evidence Woods was impaired or under the influence. There was also a second car accident with no injuries. Woods reportedly sustained injuries to both legs, but nothing life-threatening. The investigation is ongoing. And this morning, an 18-wheeler crashed into the side of a train carrying gasoline in Texas. This caused a massive explosion, but miraculously, the train conductor and truck driver survived without any injuries. NTD's Kevin Hogan brings us more on the fiery collision.
Flames so intense, officials ordered people in the area to evacuate after a truck and a train carrying fuel collided near Cameron, Texas. 3 tanker cars burst into flames when a driver of an 18-wheel truck swerved to avoid a car and T-boned the train. Motorists hundreds of yards away could feel the heat of the inferno while inside their car. Yet by a stroke of luck, everyone involved escaped to safety unharmed. The fire chief said there was a lot of fire when they arrived after the call came in around 7 a.m. The chief said they evacuated a half-mile radius and sent residents to town. He said the heat damaged homes but did not burn them, although 2 sheds did burn. Fire departments in the area are checking the air quality and did not initially detect toxic poisons in the air. And they are assessing the impact on local waterways but did not see a threat to them as of this morning. Some cars at the back of the train contained hazardous material, including phosphoric acid. The collision knocked 12 train cars off the tracks, but luckily not the hazmat cars. Hazmat teams from 2 nearby towns went to the site of the crash. The police chief said the cars will likely be left there to burn out. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Today, a Senate committee questioned former Capitol Police on the January 6th Capitol breach. All agreed that the violence was pre-planned and that a breakdown of communication from intelligence departments contributed to the chaos. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the updates on that.
Kicking off the Senate hearing, Senator Klobuchar asked the former Capitol Police chief if he saw an FBI report which indicated specific calls for violence. An unnamed person allegedly said, "Be ready to fight," and that Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in. But somehow that FBI threat report didn't get passed along to the Capitol Police.
I actually just in the last 24 hours was informed by the department that they actually had received that report. I don't believe it went any farther than from the over to the sergeant at the intelligence division.
Okay. Mr. Stanger, did you get the report?
No.
Okay, Mr. Irving.
I did not.
Okay.
All three of the former Capitol Police officials agreeing that intelligence breakdown further enabled the Capitol breach. But as to why the National Guard was so late to the Capitol that day is still a topic of dispute between them. Former Chief Sund says that ahead of January 6th, he made a request to deploy National Guard troops, but that the former House Sergeant-at-Arms said he was concerned about the optics of having troops there, a comment Irving denies.
My use of the word optics has been mischaracterized in the media. Let me be clear. Optics, as portrayed in the media, played no role whatsoever in my decisions about security.
Irving says the decision not to deploy the National Guard ahead of January 6 was a collaborative decision that they all agreed on. Sund also said that on the day of January 6th, he called the two Sergeant-at-Arms and requested they allow the National Guard to be deployed immediately. There was some dispute over the timing of that call and what exactly was said.
Chief Sund was pleading for the deployment of the National Guard. And in response to that, there was not an immediate yes.
Senator Ted Cruz then requested that all three of them submit their phone records to determine how the line of communication really played out. Other senators pushed out questions probing whether or not the Capitol Police were properly trained to handle the attack. Sund says they do have training for these circumstances, but suggests there should be more. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Biden administration is reopening a Trump-era migrant facility for children, expanding capacity due to the pandemic and increased child apprehensions at the border. But the move is drawing criticism from both conservatives and progressives. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
The Biden administration has opened its first migrant facility for children in Carrizo Springs, Texas. The facility was left over from the Trump administration. It was open for just 1 month in the summer of 2019. Now it's being reactivated as an emergency facility during the pandemic to hold up to 700 children aged 13 to 17. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki Tuesday said the administration intends to close it after the pandemic is over.
So it's a temporary reopening during COVID-19. Our intention is very much to close it, but we want to ensure that we can follow COVID protocols.
Psaki explained that due to social distancing requirements, the existing facilities have had to significantly cut their capacities, and now they need more room. The amount of unaccompanied children crossing the border has also been increasing, with January seeing over 5,700 apprehensions, the highest number for the month in years. But the reopening of the facility is drawing criticism left and right. A number of progressives took to Twitter to express their outrage, saying they voted for the end of kids in cages, not the expansion of it. Meanwhile, conservatives criticized the media's coverage of the facility, with many accusing the media of changing the terminology from kids in cages under Trump to migrant facility for children under Biden. Many shared this Washington Post article on Twitter, questioning the change in coverage and terminology. Fox News also wrote an article titled "WAPO Called Out for Report on Biden's Migrant Facility for Children After Hitting Trump's Kids in Cages." The Washington Post responded to the criticism in an article titled "No, Biden's new border move isn't like Trump's kids in cages." WAPO explained themselves, saying that what Biden is doing is different because he's not separating the children from their parents. Reporting by Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Two of Biden's cabinet nominees are meeting some opposition ahead of their confirmation votes. NTD's Christina Kim has those details.
California Attorney General Xavier Becerra was tapped by Biden to serve as the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. 75 Republican lawmakers, including senators and House members, are urging President Biden to withdraw this nomination. The letter claims Becerra isn't qualified for the role because he doesn't have enough healthcare experience. They also argue he's in favor of replacing private health insurance with government-run Medicare for All and embraces, quote, radical policies on immigration, abortion, and religious liberty. In his hearing, Becerra didn't answer if taxpayer money would fund abortions.
Will you commit to not using taxpayer money to fund abortions and abortion providers?
While we probably will not agree on all the issues, I can say to you that we will definitely follow the law when it comes to the use of federal resources. And so I can make that commitment that we will follow the law.
Becerra has an economics and law background and previously served 12 terms in Congress as a House of Representative member. During that time, he's voted against a law that would prohibit partial birth abortion, which is a form of late-term abortion. He also voted against an act that protects unborn children by recognizing an embryo or fetus as a legal victim. Becerra needs 51 votes in the Senate to be confirmed. And because the Senate is evenly split, any nomination that doesn't get support from every Democrat needs at least 2 Republican votes to go through. Biden's pick for Office of Management and Budget Director also has some challenges. Nominee Neera Tanden faces growing opposition, including Democrat Senator Joe Manchin, as well as Republicans Mitt Romney and Susan Collins. This is over her partisan statements against lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Tanden deleted over 1,000 tweets and says she regrets her Twitter attacks. But critics question her ability to make impartial decisions given her history. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Now that vaccines are being rolled out, will life get back to the way it was? The Biden team's top doctor isn't giving people a straight answer, and he's drawing a lot of criticism for that. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story and our pandemic update.
So Dr. Anthony Fauci says getting the COVID-19 vaccine isn't enough, that he can't recommend family gatherings with less prevention measures. He's waiting for a solid answer from the CDC.
Common sense tells you that, in fact, you don't have to be as stringent in your public health measures. But what we want to get firm recommendations from the CDC, which I believe will be coming soon.
Basically, he's saying that in his position, he can't make common sense suggestions. He can only wait for the science. Something similar happened a few weeks ago. Remember double masking? He told the media that double masking would be likely more effective. This was before the CDC published their study about this.
You know, it likely does because, I mean, this is a physical covering to prevent droplets and virus to get in.
These are conflicting positions. He can't make suggestions about vaccinated families getting together without the CDC's recommendation, but he can make suggestions about masks without the CDC's recommendation. What does the science tell us about vaccines? Based on CDC data, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 94-95% effective at preventing infection with COVID-19 after 2 doses. This is why the doctor's drawing a lot of criticism, because the science appears to show that it's safe to gather after getting vaccinated, and his mixed messaging. We'll keep a lookout for the CDC's suggestion. Let's go over some of the U.S.'s virus trends. We've hit the virus death toll of 500,000, but the trends are going down, which is a good sign. COVID Tracker says 7-day averages for hospitalizations, deaths, and new cases are falling. The last time we had such a low case rate was on October 23rd, 4 months ago. Now let's take a look at Britain for a moment. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he didn't think they would use vaccine passports to get access into pubs and theaters. Now he says they'll consider it.
There are clearly some quite complex issues, some ethical issues about discrimination and so on. To what extent can government either compel or indeed forbid such use of such certification? I think all that needs to be gone into, and so we're going to have a review of the whole issue.
These passports would only be used domestically in the UK. If the government approves of this, you may not be able to hit the pub if you haven't gotten the shot. Back to you, Steph.
Thanks, Miguel. And a former Clinton advisor warns of the war on humanity, how the government elite are using the pandemic to wield power. NTD's Christina Kim has the details on what she said.
Former Democratic advisor to President Clinton, Naomi Wolf, warns that the United States is on its way to becoming a totalitarian state due to lockdown orders. She spoke to Tucker Carlson on Fox News about this.
Under the guise of a real medical pandemic, we're really moving into a coup situation, a police state situation.
Wolf further explained that states like New York are using emergency measures because of the pandemic. But history tells us that, quote, no one gives up emergency powers willingly. She claims local and federal leaders are using the current situation to shut down businesses, violate people's First Amendment right to worship, and restrict movement. She says this isn't a partisan issue and should bring together left and right to protect our Constitution. Wolf has been speaking on this issue for a while, saying in November that she would never have voted for Biden if she knew his pro-lockdown stance, and that there has never been a case in the past of society-wide lockdowns to suppress economies and restrict free movement. She distinguishes lockdowns from quarantine, which she says have always been applied to those who are ill or possibly infected, not healthy people. She hopes people will wake up quickly because she believes there's only a small window of time people can safely push back. Christina Kim, NTD News.
A staffer at a college in Massachusetts is resigning over the school's anti-racist programs. She says the college created a racially hostile environment towards white employees. And now she's encouraging those experiencing the same thing to choose freedom over comfort. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Jody Shaw resigned last week due to what she calls a racially hostile environment at Smith College. She says it's caused by critical race theory-based anti-racist training programs. Shaw worked as an administrative assistant at Smith, where she was also an alumna. She previously blew the whistle on what was taking place at the college and wrote an internal complaint, but she says nothing's changed. Shaw was then given a choice. She says she was offered a settlement from the college in exchange for her silence, but she turned it down so she could speak out. In a video posted to YouTube Friday, Shaw says she was faced with a decision between comfort and freedom.
And I chose freedom. And that process made me realize that freedom's not always comfortable. Can't always have both.
Shaw says it was an extremely difficult decision, having to give up financial security in order to tell the truth and speak out against what she says she knows is wrong. She says that unfortunately, she thinks more people are going to be having to make the same choice, since critical race theory in the form of racial sensitivity training for white people is permeating institutions all around the country. Although Shaw is a self-described lifelong liberal, she says that what passes for progressive today at Smith and at so many other institutions is regressive. Shaw's resignation letter has been published by journalist Barry Weiss. In it, Shaw wrote that race-based stereotyping, quote, taps into humanity's worst instincts to break down into warring factions, and I fear this is rapidly leading us to a very twisted place. It terrifies me that others don't seem to see that racial segregation and demonization are wrong and dangerous, no matter what its victims look like. Being told that any disagreement or feelings of discomfort somehow upholds white supremacy is not just morally wrong, it's psychologically abusive. And now she says she's taking Smith College to court in order to set a legal precedent.
And we're going to establish once and for all that you cannot treat people differently in the workplace based on their skin color.
Shaw says she knows she's not the only one suffering due to this ideology in the workplace. She says, quote, our collective future as a free nation depends on people having the courage to stand up to this dangerous and divisive ideology, no matter the cost. Reporting by Grace Coulter, NTD News.
West Virginia is pushing back against teaching the theory that some races are inherently oppressive. The House first introduced the new bill on February 18th by Republican delegate Riley Keaton. It has 3 other co-sponsors. This bill says it's discrimination to promote, quote, divisive ideas that stereotype people based on race or sex in the workplace. Teachers also would be blocked from teaching these concepts, that America is fundamentally racist or sexist, or that some people are inherently oppressive because of their sex or skin color. If passed, the bill would cut off federal funding to schools that teach this curriculum. There are a few arguments over what made the lights go out in Texas during the historic winter storm. Some say it's because the wind turbines failed, while others blame natural gas. But one energy expert argues there's a lot more to it than that. NTD's Dawn Tran has the details.
When the record-breaking winter storm rolled through the U.S., Texas fell into a power crisis. Demand for electricity shot up due to freezing temperatures. The state's power grid couldn't keep up with it, so they had to institute rolling blackouts, leaving people without power for hours or even days. Some said it's because the storm stopped green energy sources like solar and wind from working. But energy expert Alex Epstein has a different explanation.
What happened was the week before, they had a huge percentage of their electricity coming from wind, actually a very small percentage coming from natural gas, because natural gas is forced to accommodate the wind. And so when it got cold, they needed to radically ramp up natural gas to 4 to 8 times what it had been when the wind was blowing. But they haven't been very focused on resilience because they've been so focused on paying for wind, which costs a lot of money. So it's not that the wind turbines froze and that caused the problems. It's that the policies to promote wind and to underinvest in reliability, that caused the problems.
Some sources reported that the Texas blackouts debunks the idea that renewable energy is unreliable, since both renewable and non-renewable energy failed during the snowstorm. But Epstein said the failure of green energy was inherent, while the failure in fossil fuels was caused by policy error.
It's not something that happened with fossil fuels anywhere else. Fossil fuels did great in the Midwest, they did great in the Northeast, they did great in a lot of the Southwest. It was just in one particular situation where fossil fuels, quote, failed. But that means it wasn't a failure of the fuels. It was a failure of the policy that made the use of fossil fuels not as resilient as it should be.
Epstein pointed to Alberta, Canada, where temperatures were much colder and demand was a lot higher, but its non-renewable energy sources were resilient enough to meet the demand. He also said that for the last decade, policy in the U.S. has focused on mandating or subsidizing green energy. Since 2009, 3 coal-fired plants were closed in Texas. This state is the leading producer of wind energy in the U.S., making up almost 30% of the country's total. Epstein said this push towards more green energy could be disastrous.
The lesson is that wind and solar cannot power an economy because they're unreliables. They do not give you power when you need it the most. So we should be grateful that we haven't gone as far as people have wanted to in the direction of the Biden plan, and we need to stop immediately.
Epstein said Texas should focus its policy on what he calls reliable electricity and not surrender to the policy that favors renewable energy sources. Don Tran, NTD News.
Up next, New York City is in a crucial week for reopening, especially with sports events and indoor dining. But now, a second case of the South African virus strain has been detected. And if you're in California, you may receive a $600 stimulus check this year. The state seems to gear towards reopening as the petition to recall the governor from office draws near. That and more when we get back.
마루 유치원 폐쇄 명령서입니다.
전 폐쇄 명령 받아들일 수 없습니다.
유치원 폐쇄 명령이라.
좀 들어간 건 어떻게 됐어? 도저히 방법이 없대?
정일도 사장님을 대신해서 제가 대신 말씀드리면 안 되겠습니까?
You know nothing about China.
Man, this is getting really out of control.
You might never be able to go back to China.
I have to take that risk. If I don't do it, who will?
New York City is starting to reopen. Stadiums and arenas are set to open at 10% capacity today, and indoor dining is increasing to 35%. NTD's Arian Pazdar reports.
After months of hibernation, the city that never sleeps is starting to wake up again. Indoor dining, the transportation system, and sports events are all set for an increased load. People we spoke to agreed with the decision to reopen the Madison Square Garden.
If the mayor and the city allows you to do it, so you can do it.
You need to show positive, got to show positive signs.
If you've got safety precautions in place, I think it can be done correctly.
But why do some states that haven't followed the same precautions have similar numbers of cases to states that are shut down?
Florida never went to another lockdown. According to the CDC, the results haven't been too bad. Florida's had fewer cases per capita than California.
Experts say the virus can spread easily if people aren't educated well on the issue.
locking down doesn't necessarily control things. Educating the public, showing the public what behaviors that lead to increased transmission can do, that can do a lot.
According to Dr. Lang, it's up to individuals' behavior to control the spread, rather than government mandates. According to the new rules, the legendary garden will reopen with 2,000 fans for the Knicks game on Tuesday. That's down from 20,000 during normal times. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
It's a chaotic week in New York City. Delayed vaccine shipments are being distributed now amid the reopening due to last week's weather. On top of that, the second case of the South African strain has been detected.
On Sunday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the first New York State resident to contract the South African variant of the coronavirus. The unnamed resident lives here in Nassau County.
This person tested positive 2 weeks ago and hasn't needed hospitalization. Across 10 states, only 22 cases have been identified. In Nassau County, infections and hospitalizations continue to go down, but residents are concerned about more lockdowns.
I do security and I also coach. And, the kids are really excited for the season to come back. And, hearing that a new case is coming around, I was like, all right, back inside doors, got to shut down for a whole nother year.
A number of studies predict this variant is 50% more transmissible than other variants of the coronavirus.
I'm nervous because I work here.
I feel a little nervous, but they seem to have everything else under control.
It's not a reason to panic. It's not a reason to freak out.
County Executive Laura Curran says she wants to keep businesses open and keep kids in school as much as possible.
So let's just keep using common sense till we get more vaccine, we get that herd immunity.
According to the CDC statistics, the South African variant is not more deadly, and some residents are staying hopeful.
We need to trust in God more about the situation.
And it's really a reminder that whatever variant it is, those common sense protocols, the mask, the social distancing, all of that works.
The finding of this new variant comes as Cuomo continues to lift restrictions across New York State. Cuomo has not indicated that this will hinder the process. Steve Lance, NTD News.
So far, the South African strain has been found in 11 states. Vaccines are expected to work against these new strains. And officials' main goal now is to get people vaccinated before these highly contagious strains spread even further. And California's governor is making moves. With less than 1 month before a petition deadline to recall him from office, he approved a bill for $600 stimulus checks this week and lightened restrictions on businesses in the state. NTD's David Lamb has more on the story.
California lawmakers on Monday passed a bill to send $600 payments to nearly 6 million people, with Governor Gavin Newsom reportedly signing it Tuesday. Low-income individuals eligible for the income tax credit can receive it, including illegal immigrants. Payments will take between about 4 and 7 weeks to arrive once tax returns are filed for 2020. This is part of a package to grant $2 billion to small businesses, over $400 million to childcare, and $100 million in financial aid to low-income community college students. After strict lockdowns, California recently allowed outdoor dining again in the state. Activist groups have protested to recall the governor, unsatisfied with California's lockdown on businesses and schools in the past year. A grassroots petition says they garnered over 1.6 million total signatures to recall Newsom. There's less than a month left for the deadline for 1.5 million valid signatures. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her, all sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
Trends may be fleeting, but values are timeless. We now bring you this new clothing brand with classic design and luxurious comfort. It's our way of sharing hope and inspiration from the world of Shenyun. We bring you Shenyun Dancer. Wear it with honor.
We reported yesterday that a top Chinese diplomat acted tough on the Biden administration. Here's how the State Department responds. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
Heard my name invoked.
The State Department is responding to a warning from Beijing. On Monday, Beijing's top diplomat listed several red lines he says the U.S. shouldn't cross if it were to engage in dialogues with the Chinese regime.
I think his comments reflect a continued pattern of Beijing's tendency to avert blame for its predatory economic practices, its lack of transparency, its failure to honor its international agreements, and its repression of universal human rights.
The Chinese foreign minister says the regime wants to reset its relationship with the U.S., but only under several conditions. One being that the U.S. must stop criticizing China's human rights record in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Beijing is also calling on the Biden administration to lift Trump's tariffs on Chinese goods and remove sanctions on Chinese tech companies. But the State Department disagrees.
We'll continue to stand up for our democratic values when human rights are being violated in Xinjiang, Tibet, or elsewhere in China, or when autonomy is being trampled in Hong Kong.
The State Department also adds that the U.S. would approach the Chinese regime from a position of strength.
We will work closely with our allies and partners across the board. That's precisely what we're doing with the Quad. It's precisely what we're doing with our allies and partners in Europe. It's precisely what we're doing with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific to approach China from a position of strength.
The White House also reacted to Beijing's demands on the same day. It says the U.S.-China relationship is one of strong competition, and the administration would work with allies on China issues. Juliet Song, NTD News.
A new report finds that Chinese spies are using code developed by the U.S. National Security Agency. They use the code for hacking operations.
An Israeli-based software company says that some features of a Chinese malware are so similar to ones developed by the National Security Agency, or NSA, they could only have been stolen from a set of leaked plans. Researchers at Checkpoint Software Technologies believe the Chinese malware uses NSA code leaked to the internet in 2017. Back in 2016 and 2017, a mysterious group of hackers released some of the NSA's most dangerous code. This allowed cybercriminals and rival nations to use U.S.-made digital break-in tools to their own advantage. Governments around the world make malware to take advantage of flaws in their rivals' software. Every time spies discover a new flaw, they must decide whether to quietly exploit it or fix the issue to stop their rivals or rogue hackers. This new report suggests that malware or break-in tools developed by governments can be used against them.
American clothing brands are moving cotton supply chains out of China's Xinjiang. That's after a U.S. ban on cotton imports from the region over forced labor concerns.
Disruptions are brewing in the fashion industry as supply chain problems grow like never before in recent history. Nike, H&M, The Gap, Old Navy, and other fashion outlets are shifting their cotton sources out of China's Xinjiang region. President of the Taiwan Textile Federation, Justin Huang, says that's because Western brands no longer want Chinese cotton. This after the U.S. banned imports of cotton products produced in Xinjiang. The U.S. sanctions were prompted by Beijing's abuse of the Uyghur ethnic minority. Some Uyghurs detained in Xinjiang labor camps have said they were tortured and forced to work in textile factories. The ban applies to products made in whole or in part with Xinjiang cotton. Vice President of the American Apparel and Footwear Association, Nate Herman, said that American fashion brands are working hard to remove Xinjiang cotton from their supply chains. Nike has since confirmed its suppliers are not using textile products from Xinjiang. The Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic say they've banned suppliers from sourcing products from Xinjiang, directly or indirectly. Same goes for H&M and furniture company IKEA. Last month's ban has affected over 80% of cotton production in China.
Hundreds of British schools could be in danger of becoming propaganda outlets for the Chinese Communist Party. That's as schools are in financial crisis due to the pandemic, and Chinese companies are looking to buy them. NTD's Don Ma has more on the story.
Hundreds of British schools are in danger of being bought by Chinese companies linked to the Chinese Communist Party or its military. The pandemic has left British private schools in a dire financial situation. Experts anticipate a feeding frenzy of purchases by firms, some of which are run by high-ranking members of the CCP. The acquisitions would expand the CCP's influence over Britain's education system. British newspaper The Mail on Sunday reports there are currently 17 British schools owned by Chinese companies. That number is expected to skyrocket. 9 of those companies are run by senior CCP members. Even before the pandemic, Chinese companies were acquiring British schools. Some of the campuses already use state-censored versions of content about China in their curriculum. As seen from Beijing's Confucius Institutes, these versions claim there's only one China, and that Taiwan is a renegade province of the mainland. They also mask human rights abuses, including those directed toward the Uyghur ethnic minority, and conceal the crackdown on Hong Kong's freedoms. A professor from the University of South Carolina Icahn Business School tells us that the situation is a concerning one for future generations.
The CCP will definitely control the content being taught. It will also bring its system of brainwashing into the schools. Slowly, the CCP's ideology will be imported into Western society, and the younger generation will grow up to welcome and support the CCP more and more.
One Chinese company openly said that its acquisition of British schools is aimed at supporting China's controversial Belt and Road Initiative. It refers to an infrastructure project heavily criticized for trapping developing countries under heavy debt and using that to expand Beijing's control overseas. On its website, it details plans to use its British schools to help boost China's global economic and political influence. This by helping expand Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative to other countries. A key player in the school purchases is the Bright Scholar Company. It's owned by the daughter of Yang Guoqiang, a high-ranking member of the CCP's Advisory Council. That's one of the regime's most important organs. Bright Scholar already owns 4 British schools. Another player is Chinese company Wanda Group. Its owner, Wang Jianlin, is also on the CCP's Advisory Council and previously served in China's People's Liberation Army as a soldier. Wanda Group also owns 2 British private schools. The pandemic has made it even easier for Chinese firms to buy private schools in Britain, thanks to the sector's severe lack of funding. Enrollments have plummeted and fees have been slashed as pupils attend class from home. British boarding schools have reportedly seen fees fall by up to 35%. Reporting by NTD's Don Ma.
Still to come, Facebook Refriends Australia. The government made some changes to its media laws. Are other countries taking note? And an economic think tank gives 10 examples of wasteful spending and partisan kickbacks in President Biden's relief bill. Find out more after the break.
Someone has to find the way to build the Great Dome. Completely new, completely original.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
What will another multi-trillion-dollar spending bill do to the economy? We look at what the Foundation for Economic Education has to say. NTD's Patrick Hayden with that story.
The Foundation for Economic Education listed 10 examples Monday of wasteful spending and partisan kickbacks in President Biden's relief bill. Here they are. $1 million to advance racial justice for farmers. $50 million for environmental justice grants. This money will go to the Environmental Protection Agency. But the Republican Study Commission says the grants are thinly veiled kickbacks because much of the money will go to left-wing political groups. $112 million for the California Transit Project. This one seems completely unrelated to the virus. It will go mostly towards an underground rail project in Silicon Valley. $10 million to preserve Native American languages. $750 million for global health. This money will go to the CDC to fund global health programs and vaccination efforts in other countries. Other non-virus related handouts include $200 million for museum and library services, $750 million for Native American housing, expansion of Obamacare subsidies, billions for public schools whether they reopen or not, and countless pet projects for powerful lawmakers. The article's author claims wasteful spending is just par for the course with big government. His solution? Just make it smaller. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Opponents of a minimum wage say it hurts low-income workers because business owners will be forced to lay off or automate their jobs. And many small businesses run pretty tight profit margins. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is against the $15 minimum wage for that very reason, but just today he said he'd support an $11 minimum. NTD's Tom Ojimek reports.
Democrat Senator Joe Manchin wants to amend the stimulus bill to mandate an $11 federal minimum wage. That's down from President Biden's proposed $15 an hour. Democrats are trying to push the bill through a process called budget reconciliation. That means they won't need Republican support, but they will need Manchin's vote, and he's against the $15 an hour hike. He says $11 would be better for his home state of West Virginia. A recent study by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found that increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025 would cost 1.4 million jobs. The office didn't study an $11 option, but it found that an increase to $12 would result in the loss of 300,000 jobs. It's still unclear whether Senate rules will allow minimum wage provisions into the relief bill under budget reconciliation procedures. The Senate parliamentarian will rule on whether it's allowed. She's the official advisor on procedural matters. Both Democrats and Republicans are expected to meet with her on Wednesday to argue their cases. She's expected to rule on it soon after. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
Australian news will be back on Facebook. The tech giant has reached an agreement with the Australian government over a proposed media law.
Well, Facebook has refriended Australia, and Australian news will be restored to the Facebook platform. And Facebook has committed to entering into good faith negotiations with Australian news media businesses in seeking to reach agreements to pay for content.
The two have been in a tense standoff over paying for news content. With the deal, Facebook will restore Australian news pages on its platform, and tech companies will have 2 months to reach private deals for news content before the government intervenes. World leaders have been watching the negotiations closely. Countries like Canada and Britain are considering similar laws. We have an update on the Boeing engine failure incident. An investigation agency says metal fatigue may have caused the damage to the engine's fan blade. Emily Wither reports.
A preliminary assessment has found signs of metal fatigue on the engine that failed on a United Airlines Boeing 777 flight at the weekend. The engine failed with a loud bang 4 minutes after takeoff from Denver. The National Transport Safety Board have been looking at damage to a fan blade. The chairman of the U.S. Air Accident Investigator told reporters it remains unclear whether the incident is consistent with an engine failure on a different Hawaiian-bound United flight in February 2018. That failure was attributed to a fatigue fracture in a fan blade. The engine that failed shed parts over a Denver suburb. The Pratt & Whitney engine, the PW4000, is used on 128 planes, or less than 10% of the global fleet. In another incident on Japan Airlines in December 2020, the country's Transport Safety Board reported it found 2 damaged fan blades, one with a metal fatigue crack on the same engine. That investigation is ongoing. The focus is more on engine maker Pratt, and analysts expect little financial impact on Boeing. But the PW4000 issues are a fresh headache for the plane maker, which saw its flagship 737 MAX grounded for nearly 2 years after 2 deadly crashes. Investigators will continue to examine the United engine's fan blade on Tuesday.
NASA scientists unveiled a first-of-a-kind home movies of last week's Daredevil Mars rover landing. It vividly shows its supersonic parachute inflation over the red planet and a rocket-powered hovercraft lowering the science lab on wheels to the surface.
I invite you now to, if you would like to close your eyes and just imagine yourself sitting on the surface of Mars and listening to the surroundings.
NASA scientists on Monday released the first sights and sounds ever recorded on Mars, a light gust of wind on the planet's surface. Vivid footage showed the rover Perseverance deploying its red and white supersonic parachute by way of a rocket-powered hovercraft and lowering its wheels to the ground in a plume of dust and smoke.
Ready to begin seeking the signs of past life.
The project's lead engineer described watching the most advanced rover ever developed take its place on Mars.
It gives me goosebumps every time I see it. Just amazing. I hope everybody kept their hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times while it was in motion.
So we're actually beginning to... The footage was captured last Thursday from cameras mounted at different angles of the Perseverance landing craft as it passed through the planet's thin atmosphere to gently touch down inside a basin called the Jezero crater. The 6-wheeled vehicle sailed through space for almost 7 months. The video montage was presented to reporters 4 days after the historic landing. The chief imaging scientist behind the project explains what's presented.
This is it. This is Mars. We're here in our place that we're going to be exploring over the next months and coming years.
Scientists hope to extract samples from Martian rock for future analysis back on Earth, the first such specimens ever collected by humankind from another planet.
Coming up, outdoor amusement parks are opening back up in New York. That includes the iconic Luna Park in Coney Island.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Get ready to take the family out for some fun. New regulations in New York are making it possible.
With a harsh winter and cabin fever settling in, there is a ray of sunshine in New York State, with the governor's office announcing that outdoor amusement parks can open with a 33% capacity beginning April 9th. It has been more than a long winter for attractions like Legoland in Orange County, New York, that will finally be able to open this year, and for Luna Park in Coney Island, that hasn't been open to the public since the fall of 2019.
One of my main resolutions for 2021 is to kind of look to the positive, silver lining.
Very happy Coney Island's opening up next year. We missed the rides, the happiness, and the festivals. I wish we would have opened up last year. So I think next year is going to be a 180-degree turnaround.
Other states, like New Jersey, Connecticut, and Florida, are already open at higher occupancies. For amusement park operators like Alessandro, whose family has been in the business for 5 generations, he is looking to exceed safety standards and work with the state to hopefully open past the 33%.
Think about Florida. Florida, the governor has said, you know what? There is no capacity limitation. Like, if you want, you go to 100%.
It may still be cold outside, but spring and summer are right around the corner. And with new regulations and opening up, parks like Luna may give families a great opportunity to finally get outside and enjoy the great outdoors. Steve Gelati, NTD News, New York.
A 14-year-old girl from Australia spends hours behind her computer, watching films or social media, you might think. Actually, she's running her own business that she started 3 years before. NTD's Trevor Piper tells us her story.
Business owner is not a title many 14-year-olds can claim, but Tia Devo wears it with pride.
I was not expecting all of this to just happen.
Tia and Belle is a venture that took off when she was only 11 years old. Now, in a few short years, her idea has blossomed into a successful business. It started as a native-themed clothing line, but quickly expanded into accessories like candles. And it's a passion with a purpose. The brand isn't just about profit, it's about representing Indigenous culture.
I think it's really good because I'm also spreading a lot of valuable information about Indigenous people.
She says she draws inspiration from her heritage, expressing it through clothing and homewares. But as always, when there's a gain, there is loss too.
It can be pretty crazy sometimes because it's sometimes I'll have to do stuff to help out with the business, so I can't really just go hang out with my friends.
Since the beginning, she's received support from her father for her online shop.
Yeah.
I didn't really think that I'd be doing this type of support with respect to her owning a business at the age of 11.
The young entrepreneur has a bright future ahead as she continues to build her brand. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
One volunteer is helping take care of a special part of Australian wildlife, orphaned kangaroo joeys. The effort comes after drought and bushfires decimated their habitat over the last few years. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Andy is an orphaned, 7-month-old eastern grey kangaroo joey. He drinks milk formula, carefully mixed and measured by his caretaker, Christy Jarrett. Attacked by crows after losing his mother, Andy now stays in a cloth pouch in Jarrett's home. He will stay there until he's strong enough to be released back into the bush.
He's had a bit of surgery and he's doing really well now. He'll be in care for probably about 12 months, 18 months until he's ready to be released. He's a pouch-bound joey, so he stays in his pouch all the time.
Jarrett, who works at a local school, said she and her partner have cared for more than 200 kangaroos, wallabies, and wallaroos. All have been raised, nursed, and fed before being released back into the wild. The love affair started 10 years ago, when Jarrett rescued a wallaroo joey from its dead mother's pouch. Since then, she hasn't been able to stop.
It was such an eye-opener to learn how very human they were, how emotional, how interactive. They're not pets, they are wild animals, but they are so amazing to learn about.
When it's time for the recovered animals to leave, the gate is left open so that they can come and go. Some continue visiting Jarrett's home long after release, like Daisy, a regular visitor who hops in from the bush now and then. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.